We'll get back to your regularly scheduled program of the review of Carach Angren's This Is No Fairy Tale, but first, a fairy tale. Once upon a time, in a land not that far from that in which we live in today, not that long ago, there were a bunch of supposed metal fans. A bunch of fans of bands such as Cradle of Filth and Dimmu Borgir, who felt as though they were true in cults, that felt as though they knew all that there was to know about black metal, and felt as though they knew all that there was to know about metal in general. These arrogant little twits started to love the poetic lyrics, enjoyed fractured fairy tales that involved something aside from happily ever after, and thus started to latch upon these bands. Latch upon bands that maybe didn't always talk about fractured fairy tales, in fact perhaps wrote tales of their own, ones with their own tongue, own quill, and own word, but just the same fell in love with the prose. And these individuals, while they had the best of intentions, grew to become a very irritating little troop, an irritating little tribe of individuals that praised these bands and destroyed and hated the rest. Unless, of course, they were trying to impress, that is, the man or woman that they had their eye on. Yes, this fairy tale is one that doesn't exactly have the best of endings, considering now look where we are. We're in 2015. We're a couple of years removed from this, and these individuals seem to have been eradicated from the earth. They come up and show themselves every time a new Cradle of Filth release is dropped, but for the most part, they've become kind of an extinct species of individual or metal fan. Now we come to our feature presentation. We come to Carach Angren and This Is No Fairy Tale, and I'm getting some of the same feelings once again. And it's not the band's fault, it really isn't, it's just this is what they like to do. They have a very symphonic breed of black metal that they really are able to infuse, and they like to infuse it with lyrics and storytelling all about folklore, all about horror stories, or in the case of This Is No Fairy Tale, what seems to be a very, very deranged retelling of the Hansel and Gretel story, one that involves an alcoholic, very abusive, rapist father, a very sad mother that eventually kills herself, and two young children that are left to sort of fend for themselves and run away only to find the house of course, legend, only to devour it and become devoured. It's a very, very simple tale, one that we've heard ever since we were youths, and one that has been kind of manipulated, bastardized, and raped itself by the band and by their pen. And for the most part, I'm not going to lie, the story itself is not that bad. It's not poorly constructed whatsoever. In fact, it's kind of a nice little deranged retelling of the story. It's just one that is kind of plagued by a couple of things, at least on the wordsmith side, that sort of make it a bit difficult to follow. And I don't mean difficult to follow as it's a convoluted storyline. It's one that just kind of doesn't grip your attention and hold you on for the entirety of the ride. It suffers from some basic language. It suffers from some very repetitive notion. This is something where central themes are being kind of repeated to us ad nauseum in order to really kind of drive the point home, but in reality, the point has already been driven home and been driven well sufficiently. And so this is a tale that does suffer from a little bit of kind of being a little too in your face with the information, being a little too forward and a little too direct, one that definitely needed to kind of focus a little bit more on focusing on other aspects of the story or other descriptors, something where this is one where it feels as though literally the lyrics are being read from a storybook as opposed to being told with a unique voice. Musically speaking though, this is one that definitely feels a bit vis-a-vis, you know, comme ci comme ça. The symphonic elements are definitely impressive enough. It almost feels as though Danny Elfman became a member of a heavy metal band and decided that he was going to direct this score of this twisted fairy tale, and of course that means that Helena Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp may actually be cast within this, unless of course this is 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah, Danny Elfman did the score for 50 Shades of Grey. Go pout in a corner now. But it's something where it grips, but it does not keep you. It does not keep you really, really grounded to your chair listening to this. You feel almost like you could get up and come back at any time frame and kind of get jumped right back in and know exactly where you're at. It doesn't have that feel where it is absolutely essential for you to check this out from moment A all the way to the closing moment B. It instead definitely feels just a bit average. It has great markings of a very solid metalworking and metal crafting. It definitely has a nice texture to it, a nice layer, and it definitely flows well. So there's definitely no dispute that the flow of this album is not sufficient. It's just not one that feels like it grips. It's an album that feels very much like it has individual moments that are more important or stand out in your mind rather than whole entire tracks. And more often than not, they stand out because they feel just a little cheesy, either that or driven home a little over excessively. Her successful suicide is supposed to be a very potent and landmark moment, but the problem with this is that it was already kind of assumed. It was something that was lyrically assumed throughout the duration of the track when crows tick on windows. So this is something that's already sort of been driven home to us. It's not something that necessarily needs to be driven home again in such a potent fashion. But this is a little bit nitpicky. I understand that. So what about the overall breadth, the overall scope of this album? How does it really, I guess, fan out with others within the genre? And once again, it suffers from that just very average feel. And this band feels very average. I've listened to some of their earlier work, and for all of the folks that feel absolutely blown away by this group, I just don't get it. I'm getting a lot of those sensations from a couple of years ago, from the tale in which we wove prior to even speaking about This Is No Fairy Tale. I feel that this is something that's going to impress those that are mere laymen as opposed to those who are long-trekked metal fans. It's going to be something that's going to more so stray toward those that enjoy something considering it's a novelty as opposed to the fact that it's something that's very classically derived. Instead, it's an album that feels very flat at times, as though it just does not have the pace in order to keep itself going. The storytelling is done well enough, although it is, as I said, cursed by sometimes oversimplification. But by and large, this is a story that has gotten probably the proper retoolings that it needs in order to really fit the idea of a very maligned and malicious fairy tale. So that much I'm going to give a passing grade. But this album itself just feels very average, very mundane. It's not one that really stands out. It's not one that within a week I'm going to instantly recall. It's instead one that I feel is just going to be cast aside a little bit. Once again, not to any fault of the band themselves. This is definitely a band that has been trying to craft a work that is trying to combine a couple of things that are just not very easy to do. It's not easy to combine a story of folklore with symphonic black metal in this variety. It's not something that's very simple to accomplish, so I'm definitely by no fault faulting them for trying. I'm just saying that the result just doesn't have that it factor, and that's all the more that needs to be said. This is an album I would give a 73 out of 100 to. This is one that I feel a lot of people are also going to disagree with me on. However, that's fine. That's your opinion. That's how you feel. This is something that speaks a little bit more to you than it did to me. But with that in mind, what did you guys think about this album? What did you guys think about This Is No Fairy Tale by Carach Angren? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what kind of bands that you enjoy that perhaps are in the same vein as Carach Angren, or other bands that you feel are a little bit better. Help out by telling more people about music that they perhaps don't know about. Don't. Whew. It's warm in here. I feel like I'm in an oven. Maybe someone's going to eat me. That would be a tale. The fairy tale of the life-death of coverkillernation. He was eaten to death by a puma. Or a toaster. It's one of the two. I don't know why I found it so fucking funny. Sting!